Welcome to our Friday forum. Faye Wilson Kennedy, Understanding the Unhoused in Sacramento and California. Today's presentation will be recorded. You can view it in two separate ways, either on the Renaissance Society Forum channel on YouTube or from the Renaissance website. If you have a question, you can open the QA, which is down at a button down at the bottom of the screen, type in your question, click send. Questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. Chat is disabled. We've also turned on closed captioning. If you'd like to turn it off, click the closed captioning live transcript at the bottom to show or hide subtitles. This also gives you the ability to size the text on the CC using the subtitle settings button. And now I'm very happy to welcome Kay Wilson Kennedy. She has more than 30 years of experience as a community organizer, human services professional, educator, and group facilitator working with diverse communities, agencies, and organizations throughout Northern California. She currently serves as chair of the Sacramento Area Black Caucus and a co-chair for the California Poor People's Campaign. Among the many causes she is passionate about, she has addressed historical as well as modern redlining, which involves covenants that prohibit African American, Asian American, and other minority groups from owning property in certain neighborhoods. She will share this information as well as homeless demographics at local and state levels and explore how neighbors can engage and support our unhoused populations. Welcome, Faye.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
I know you're feeling a little under the weather today, and so we really appreciate you taking the time to educate you on this very, very important topic. Thank you.
Okay. No, thank you.
Five, 6, 7, 8. Everybody's got a right to live. Everybody's got a right to live. And before this campaign fails, we'll all go down to jail. Everybody's got a right to live. Everybody's got a right to live. Everybody's got a right to love. Everybody's got a right to dream. Everybody's got a right to learn. Everybody's got a right to live. Everybody's got a right to. Everybody's got a right to live. Everybody's got a right to live. And before this campaign fails, we'll all go down to jail. Everybody's got a right to live. Everybody's got a right to live. Everybody's got a right to live. And before this campaign fails, we'll all go down to jail. Everybody's got a right to live. Everybody's got a right to live. Everybody's got a right to live. Woo! Yeah.
Thank you very much. We show that particular video all the time at the local level. We use it when we do gatherings at the national level. Once again, my name is Faye Wilson Kennedy. I would like to thank the Renaissance Society for hosting me today and the campaign. I'd like to thank all of you for joining us today And as Lori mentioned, I am dealing with a sore throat, so please bear with me. So I would like to take a few moments to really humanize this by saying a big thank you to my unhoused brothers and sisters, those who are unhoused and formerly unhoused. I'd like to give them a shout out and thank them for allowing us to organize with them, for allowing us into their space, their homes, whether it's a tent, whether it's underneath the freeway. They always make us feel welcome. So a special shout out to Curtis, Matthew, Rhonda, Tiara, Gloria, Dante, Betty, Paul, Mr. Benny, Violet, Ernie, John, Charles. Thank you. These are just a few people that we've met over the years. And then we would like to say the PPC, we organize at the national level, and many of you know our national leadership, Reverend Dr. William Barber and Reverend Dr. Liz Theo Harris. But locally, we organize with many groups that you may or not be familiar with. And we have to give them a shout out because without their support, we wouldn't be able to do the work that we do. So I came to the campaign via the Sacramento Area Black Caucus, an organization that I've been a member of since I was a young college student, if you can imagine that. We also organize with the Sacramento Homeless Organizing Committee, the Sacramento Homeless Union, my neighborhood association, Southeast Village Neighborhood Association, the Sacramento Climate Coalition, North Carol Resist, Sacramento Peace Action, Sacramento Services Not Sweet, Safe Ground, the Zapatista Coalition, South Sacramento Heart, the Jewish Voices for Peace, Loaves and Fishes, the Black Parallel School Board, SEIU 1000, an organization based right there at Sac State, the Chris J. Foundation, working around the issue of race and immigration. These are all of our local partners that we engage in. Next slide, please. So to give you a little overview of the organization, back in 2017, the California Poor People's Campaign was actually launched, and actually myself and the Black Caucus was a part of that. Many of us had an opportunity to meet Reverend Barber when he was here in Sacramento at the church, at St. Mark's Church, and then he gave us the inspiration to help launch. So today, the Sacramento Poor People's Campaign is doing work at the local level. Initially, we were called the Northern California Poor People's Campaign because we were working with folks not only in Sacramento, but folks in the Bay Area and in the Central Valley. We have since refocused and mainly work as the Sacramento Poor People's Campaign. We rise up and demand that the 140 million poor and low-income people in our nation, from every race, creed, color, sexuality, and place, are no longer we're going to be ignored, dismissed, or pushed to the margin of our political and social agenda. Next slide, please. So what you're seeing here is a picture of members of the Poor People's Campaign as well as community members. We do a monthly breakfast that's turned into a brunch on Stockton Boulevard, where we invite, Stockton Boulevard is in District 6, the district in which I live in. Excuse me. And so we invite neighborhood association groups that either are doing business in that area to come and join us. It's one way to move past the barriers and tear down the myths that people have about people who are unhoused. So the gentleman you see standing there, he and I serve on the board of the local Colonial Heights Library. So we invite people from the library to come and join us to bring down those myths. The library plays a crucial role, particularly before the pandemic, because it was where the unhoused could go to the bathroom, get clean water, use the computer. So once the pandemic hit and the library shut down, life changed for a lot of the unhoused. Next slide, please. Okay. In Sacramento, on any given night, there's over 5,000 people who are unhoused or homeless in our city. In any given year, that can range between 10,000 to 11,000 residents. These are people who are living in tents, who are living in parks, who are living under the freeway, who may be living in a vacant lot in your community. They're living, trying to survive like many of us who are trying to survive. Despite local concerns about many people who are experiencing homelessness, the vast majority of the people who are unhoused in Sacramento are from Sacramento County. There's a lot of myths that people say that they are coming from other communities, from other counties, but actually they're from Sacramento County. And specifically, the folks up and down the Stockton Boulevard corridor, once we engage them and talk and listen, we find out that many of them that used to live in the communities, and that's why they stay on the Stockton Boulevard corridor. Black and African American and indigenous folks are significantly overly represented in the unhoused population, both locally, statewide, and nationally. And a lot of that has to do with systemic racism and employment opportunities and a lack of access to education. Next slide, please. The two pictures that you're looking at now is the picture of myself and Brother Carter, who partners with me daily when we're out on the street providing basic needs. And basic needs for us means we provide clean water, food, community resources, information about how to stay healthy and safe during the pandemic, providing masks, making sure everyone's masked up, making sure as much as possible people practice social distancing. It can be very hard to do that when you're unhoused. And then the other picture you see is us feeding our unhoused brothers and sisters down at City Hall. Next slide, please. So there's a report that many of you may hear about, and you can Google it. It's a point-in-time report or survey, and it talks about, it provides really basic data that's open to everyone. So the data talks about how many people who are unhoused, between 10 to 11,000 individuals. The majority of them experiencing homelessness are unhoused. The average age is 35, and the 61% of those, 20% of those are families. That means they're families, primarily women with their children who are unhoused. So on any given night, you're going to have anywhere between, on the low end, 500 up to more than 700 children under the age of 18 out on the street. And this number doesn't necessarily include young folks who've aged out of foster care and have no place else to go. And many of their foster care parents do allow them on a regular but irregular basis to stay with them. 50% of the homeless families are Black, many of the government reports say. And this is something, as a society, we really, really need to understand how that's tied to systemic racism and how that's tied to folks just not being able to access services, and that services need to be culturally appropriate and everything. Next slide, please. So what you're seeing here is a picture of an unhoused person. Generally, before we take their pictures, we always ask, can we take your pictures out of respect? It's just to show that oftentimes our unhoused neighbors are just forced to set up households anywhere they can that they feel safe. Women and children are the most vulnerable of the unhoused population because we live in a society, unfortunately, that is misogynistic and sexist, and many of the women face rape, physical abuse, domestic violence. The same thing that happened to them if they were to live in a house, it happens to them when they're unhoused, but it's even more pernicious in everything. Next slide, please. So one of the things that the campaign in coalition with other groups formed an organization called Services Not Sweeps, where we focus on, rather than our local elected officials spending money on law enforcement or the park rangers to sweep through encampments, is that let's start providing much needed services for them. So this is an example. We want to stop the sweep, and we want to provide services for those at the Stockton Boulevard encampment or any encampments throughout the area. We want to stop the criminalization of people who are unhoused and stop the criminalization of people who are poor. And so nationally, as well as statewide, we have some mottos. We talk about it's okay to fight poverty, but not the poor, not the individual, or not the group. Everyone has a right to live, not one step back, and we won't be silent anymore, meaning we will join in coalition with our unhoused brothers and sisters, and we will not stand back and let people be misused and criminalized. We're building a movement to overcome systemic racism, poverty, ecological devastation, and the war economy, with the understanding that everyone has a right to live with dignity and respect. Next slide, please. So in order to really, really understand things, you have to understand the population of the unhoused, whether it's in your particular neighborhood or within Sacramento or at the state. So for example, in California in 2018, there were over 128,000 people who were homeless. And I mentioned to you earlier, in Sacramento on any given night, there are 5,000 people who are unhoused. That means they're living in cars, under freeway, in parks, in empty lots. And so we really need to talk about how we're going to change that dynamic. And Black folks and Indigenous folks are the largest of that population. And we really need to begin to address and come up with policies how we're going to end homelessness for everyone, but particularly looking at why Black and people of color, and particularly Black and Indigenous people, are disproportionately represented. What's also very traumatizing is that 45% of the homeless deaths recorded were people of color. I know firsthand in 2019, I befriended a person who was unhoused. She was active in the library with us. She did some volunteer work with us through the Sacramento Area Black Caucus, and she was murdered. She was a young African-American woman, and we realized we had a lot in common. She was originally from the Plumas area, and I used to do organizing in the Plumas area. So these are some of the issues that we really need to think about. Okay. The other thing we would like to help people understand is that being a part of the campaign, there are fundamental principles that we all agree to be a part of. We're committed to uplifting and deepening the leadership of those most affected by systemic racism, poverty, the war economy, ecological devastation, and building unity across lines of division. So it's really important that we really understand that although I'm a person of African descent, but I join in solidarity but other people, be they Black, be they white, be they Latino, be they Indigenous, be they trans, be they gay, be they whatever. We join in solidarity with them, because until they're free, none of us are going to be free. And so these are some of the things that we sign on to as being a part of the Poor People's Campaign. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we've been working with in coalition with others is making sure that those who are unhoused are getting vaccinated. So we provide the information, we ask questions, we work with the local health department as well as other medical professionals to make sure that they're not left out. We all know that people of color are, once again, are disproportionately impacted by the virus. And so we, like I said to you earlier, Black and brown and Indigenous folks are also disproportionate that impacted by the virus. And so we're out there engaging people, encouraging people. I share with them that I've had my 2 shots, that I've been vaccinated, that it's okay, I'm fairly healthy, other than a sore throat today, and that when Dr. MK and other residents come around to talk to them about taking the vaccine, that they should engage them in conversation, that they're going to be okay with the vaccine. The Project Room Key under Gavin Newsom has been a program that's been very helpful, but it's not big enough. We were able to get one of our first folks into housing through living in a hotel through Project Room Key. Thank you very much. Next slide, please. So I'd like to spend a few moments talking about families. As I said, the majority of the folks, believe it or not, who are unhoused are families with children. And that what we're really afraid of is right now is that we have a looming eviction moratorium that's due to end in June, which means that if we have all these folks who are currently unhoused with children, we're going to even have more families unhoused because they're not going to be able to pay their rent. The average cost of rent in Sacramento has gone up to $1,800 a month for 1 bedroom. So you can do the math. If you're a parent with 2 or 3 children, you need at least 2 bedrooms. That's almost double the cost. And so it's really become a problem. The other thing we need to be concerned about is that oftentimes when children are unhoused, they're not going to school on a regular basis for a variety of reasons. That one thing, they don't want people to know that they're unhoused. They don't have a way to clean their clothes. Excuse me. They don't have a way to take baths on a consistent basis. So these are issues that when you live in a house that you don't have to worry about. Okay. We have a large number of folks who are unhoused who identify their sexual orientation as gay or bisexual, and so these are issues when we're talking about programs. And one of the things we've been working with City Council member Katie Venezuela is setting up safe ground down on the WX corridor. Is setting up spaces where people can come together and feel comfortable and not feel like they're unprotected based on their sexual identity and everything. On any given single night in 2019, there were approximately 372 families with children experiencing homelessness in Sacramento. And as you can see on the slide, excuse me, we give you a breakdown of how many adults, how many children, and what that really, really means for us. That means we need to develop policies to keep people in their homes. We need to look at the living wage, because if rent costs $1,800 a month for a 1 bedroom, people are going to have to be earning more than the minimum wage And actually, we're pushing for $15 an hour, and that's not going to be able to support the high cost of rent as we move forward. Next slide, please. And so the average age for folks who are unhoused, they're young. They may not look young because they live a rugged life, but they're really, really young. We see the two extremes. We see young people, and we see a large number of people who are over 50 who are unhoused and been unhoused for a long time. We also are seeing a large number of young people between the ages of 18 to 24 who are unhoused. And someone asked earlier, why are so many people unhoused? One of the reasons that they're unhoused is because they're working what we used to call low-wage jobs. Now we call them frontline workers' jobs, where they don't make a lot of money. And they may have 3 up to 4 roommates. And if one roommate leaves, or if one roommate has their income reduced or their hours reduced, that impacts everyone in that particular household. We have people living with their elderly parents or elderly family members. And so when that person dies, they can't afford to make the house payment on their own, and they become unhoused. And we find out a lot when talking to the folks in District 6 who are part of the Stockton Boulevard corridor. Next slide, please. And so we're coming to an end. And before we come to an end, I would like to acknowledge my co-chairs and just share briefly with you how California is organized. California has 4 co-chairs. We have Nell from Oakland. We have Reverend Dr. Beth from the San Diego area. We have Rose from the Inland Empire area. And then we have myself. We have 6 different regions, including the Inland Empire, LA, San Diego, Orange County, Bay Area. The Bay Area has one of the larger regions with about 9 counties composing of the Bay Area. And then we have Sacramento, a county, a region that I represent. And so I would like to leave you with this. If we're really going to change the outcome for the unhoused, they have to be at the center of the discussion, and we have to be willing to shut up and let them talk and listen. We have to really understand the role that wage, the amount of money a person earns, will determine how they're going to live and what quality of life they will have. We have to look at those support services or mechanisms. So, for example, if we really are concerned about people going to work, we need to look at childcare. We need to look at not just childcare, but quality subsidized childcare. We need to look at and invest more in programs like Next Move, St. John's Women's Shelter, the Tubman House, my sister's house, the Middleview Women's Shelter. We need to look at programs like that and expand them, and then even think out of the box and put programs more in neighborhoods that are more accessible. We need to look at more programs to service our youth or young adults. And we also need to recreate more mustard seed type programs, where right now the only type of program like mustard seed is in the downtown area. But we need a mustard seed program in the Oak Park area. We need a mustard seed program in the Del Paso area, where all folks have access to them. And one other thing, we really need to have better coordinated services between the city, the county, and our nonprofit community, once again, with making sure the unhoused and those most impacted by poverty are part of the discussion. We need to have better communication. And finally, if we're really going to change the dynamic of how we engage poor folks, whether they're unhoused or not, We really are going to have to invest more in public transportation, because that's how the majority of poor folks get around, by using public transportation. We need to look at our bus service, light rail, and make it more accessible, where there are longer hours, where they go more into communities. So right now, like I said, I live in District 6. The bus doesn't run on a regular basis. Many of the folks have to go over to the Old Florin Mall to catch the bus, to connect them with downtown, to light rail stations, to then go out further into the community. These are all issues that we have to think about, be creative, and build partnerships with. And finally, I would like to give a final shout out to my quilting group, who always steps up to make quilts for the folks at the family shelter in Oak Park, and for the folks over at the Bruce Field nursing home. These are one way how people can begin to support those marginalized folks that oftentimes are forgotten about. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Faye. Oh my goodness. You have certainly given us a comprehensive overview of the multitude of problems that this situation originate from. If I were going to ask you, what's one thing I could do, which I'm sure many of our members might be thinking, what's one thing I could do to start to make a difference?
So I always say is that to realize that all of us, most of us, are just 1 or 2 paychecks away from being unhoused ourselves, and to remember that. And when you engage a person that you think may be unhoused, treat him or her with dignity and respect as if you would treat anyone. And that's the beginning. And then people can always call me up. We could talk to them. But there's many different organizations that people can support with donations, actual financial donation, or actual physical donation of different things. So like when we do the breakfast, we're always looking for goodie bags. We're looking for coffee for them. We're looking, particularly in the winter months, we're looking for warm items like mittens and gloves and hats and different things like that. And look for those programs who are currently serving the unhoused, because they need to be supported. They need people power support. And I tell people that you can mask up and you can join us once a month on a Saturday when we're out engaging folks and feeding them.
So you listed a lot of great organizations. I guess you just find one that you really identify with and then reach out. Okay, thanks so much. Someone's asked, what steps could be taken to give latitude for people to set up tents in our neighborhoods at the same time keeping cleanliness in mind?
So one of the models that we've been advocating for years is called the Safe Ground model. And one of the things that we like about the Safe Ground model is that it's just like in my neighborhood, I have a neighborhood association. Safe Ground model is self-governed. So you have people who are part of leadership, and they help make decisions. The city and the county may have to do some investment to come in to pick up the trash on a regular basis. Like you and I, those of us who live in homes, we get our trash or garbage picked up on a weekly basis. The same things have to happen at encampments. Garbage and trash has to be picked up on a regular basis. Rules and regulations within Safe Ground, the folks living in Safe Ground will create their own rules and regulation and enforce those. That's one way. But the ultimate goal is to make sure everyone is in a house, in a structure, protected from the elements. The Safe Ground is the beginning, but ultimately we want people housed.
So if there's people setting up tents in our neighborhood, do we contact somebody and ask for some dumpsters?
There is an organization called Safe Ground, and depending on where you live, so if you live in the city of Sacramento, I would encourage people to contact their city council person. If you live in the county, contact your county board of supervisor and start the dialogue. In the city of Sacramento, each city council person is charged with coming up with a homeless master plan. So myself and my fellow District 6 community members, we're working on District 6 community plan. Councilmember Katie Venezuela, she's working with her folks in District 4. So in the city of Sacramento, that is happening. Contact your local city council person. If you live in the county, ask your county board of supervisor, what are they doing about the unhoused, and encourage them to use this model to begin to address those issues.
Okay, great suggestions. Someone's asked, what's the difference between the terms homelessness and unhoused?
It's a term that a lot of people who, because homelessness is viewed by so many in a very negative light, and so we're trying to flip the switch, change the narrative, and a lot of people who are homeless prefer to be called unhoused. So that's it. So what we try to do is we engage folks, we listen to how they would like to be referred to, and then we refer to them that way and everything.
Okay. So we always hear that, or frequently hear, the myth that most of the homeless are mentally ill, almost as an excuse. What is the truth, and what help is provided to them?
Sure. So, and I always refer back to is that they're not mental health issue is a challenge for all of us, whether we live in a house or unhoused. And oftentimes, folks who are unhoused are under tremendous pressure, and it's being unhoused that really impacts their mental health, because the majority of their day is spent trying to find, first of all, clean water, particularly with the pandemic, because they can't get into facilities where they used to could get water and everything, or when it's extremely hot outside, trying to find a place. So being unhoused has a tremendous impact on their mental health. It just exacerbates it. And it's not a lot of help for them unless they can get in programs like the ones I talked about, like St. John's Shelter, like whatever. You almost have to be in a program or have a healthcare provider that they're feeling comfortable to say, I'm depressed, I need some help and everything.
Okay. Someone said it in the 6 regions in California that you mentioned, they were all urban. Is there a non-governmental organization that's advocating for the unhoused in Northern California, north of Sacramento, like places like Orville and those kind of places? Okay,
so we don't have a Poor People's Campaign, but we have a partner organization in those communities, and we're always trying to build out. So in the Yuba City, Marysville, our partner organization, the Sacramento Homeless Union is organizing there. Up in the Chico area, we may be kicking off a PPC in the Auburn area. So we're always trying to build out and trying to get people to join us and to start one in the community in which they live in. We have at-large convenings once a month where people can come and listen to talk about what it would take to be a local Poor People's Campaign in their particular city, county, or region.
Okay. RT is working to address a lot of the needs, travel needs. Is your organization linked with them?
We try to work with the different organizations who are addressing transportation needs. And so let me give you an example. It's very difficult for unhoused people to use public transportation because they can't carry their items, a lot of their items on the bus with them. Or a lot of people using public transportation view the unhoused in a negative way and will make sometimes inappropriate comment like, you smell or you look dirty. Like all of us have a body odor when it's hot outside. And so it's different things like that. but we really need to expand to make sure that it runs later. There's more routes where you're just not just meeting the needs of the unhoused, but meeting the needs of poor folks who need public transit and actually to go to work, to go to school, to improve their quality of life so they won't become homeless. So you're solving two problems at one time.
I see. Are there any groups focused on helping people who are maybe right on the edge of losing their housing?
So yes and no. So what we try to do is refer, depending on if it's like a legal issue, and sometimes there are legal issues that people are grappling with, landlord-tenant issues. And so we refer folks like that to Legal Services of Northern California. There are programs like rental assistance program. We try to connect people to those particular types of programs to help people with those types of needs and things like that. Not enough.
Okay. Are you promoting tiny homes at all as an option?
Tiny homes, sure. Tiny homes we promote all programs that would help get people off the street and into homes. So whether it's a tiny home, whether it's an apartment, whether it's a house, whether it's a duplex, whether it's a mobile home. And so the first thing may be is getting people into what we call a safe ground type of encampment, where people are feeling safe, it's self-governance, where people are building their capacity. And then whether it's tiny homes, it's getting people housed out of the element. That's the most important thing.
Would a guaranteed minimum income help alleviate this problem, since it's really?
I think it would, but it has to be. It has to be at a rate where it can. So once again, if the guaranteed income is $1,000 a month, but the average cost of rent is $1,800 a month, that's not going to really help a person. That we have to really look at how do we look at and promote roommates, promote cooperative housing, promote people shared housing. We as a society, we really have to rethink, because we are, as a society, we're very individualistic, right? And so we have to rethink, if we really are going to solve the issue of unhoused, we have to rethink how we think about things. And I think that's the hardest, is to get people to rethink that. And it's doubly hard during the pandemic.
What exactly is the governor's unhoused program? Is it primarily using motel rooms, or is there something more to that?
Sure. So there's motel rooms, there's Project Room Key, where they put people in trailers, generally people with families. Right now, we just got a family working with Councilwoman Gada, Councilwoman Katie Venezuela, Hope Cooperative, and the Purpose Campaign, along with the Sacramento Homeless Union. We have, for the past 2 weeks, we have been spending days and hours of getting folks up and down the Stockton Boulevard corridor and the WX corridor housed, getting them into motel and trailers. First priority to women and children. I mean, literally, Brother Carter is out on the street texting me the information. I'm writing it up and emailing it in. So those are the priorities, will be our priorities for the next probably 2 more weeks.
Are those some of the changes that you'd like to see in Sacramento, or is there something else, maybe 1 or 2 really specific things that you'd like to see to happen sooner rather than later?
Sure. I think, thank you. That's a great question. I think more funding for rental assistance has to be established, as well as oftentimes there's program for rental assistance, but there's not a lot of programs that help people who are currently homeowners to keep from losing their home. because once they lost their home, it's very difficult, whether it's a house or an apartment or a duplex. So more programs like that to help people to keep them in there, whether it's their house or an apartment. And then that information has to be shared. And one of the things we have to really help people understand is that technology, a lot of unhoused folks don't always have access to technology. So you and I could go charge up our phones. So when the pandemic hit, the places where they could go charge up their phones, like libraries, community centers, closed down. And there's no places where they could charge up their phones, right? And so it's very hard to try to conduct business when you're battling issues like that. So what we would try to do is gather up people's phones, label them. Our office is off of Stockton Boulevard, and try to keep people's phones, get them charged for them so they can conduct business. So it's different. It's helping people rethink how we conduct business. And even though we are a technology society, if you're unhoused, it's very hard to conduct business. One, if you don't have a phone, and two, if your battery is dead.
Does the city or
so
county
more
provide?
charging stations.
Got it. Does the city or county provide porta potties or water in the areas of the homeless encampments?
Yes and no. So what we try to do is the county generally provides that, and we try to work with the county and request that, but that has to come out of, so more funding has to be provided for that and everything. And then they have to be maintained on a much more regular basis. So you just can't drop them off and not keep them serviced and everything.
I'm sure
Becomes
that's
a health
problematic.
hazard.
Oh, where are the homeless underneath the WX freeway being moved to, and is the city helping do that?
Oh, the city is leading the effort. So they're being moved to where the old farmers market that's underneath the freeway. So they're going to set up a safe ground style things there, and then the ones that we can get into housing are being moved into motels throughout Sacramento and everything. So yeah, it's the city Councilwoman Katie Venezuela is taking the lead on that, along with city staff, the campaign, and the Sacramento Homeless Union and Hope Cooperative. We've been busy. I didn't think I could type that fast.
We have a couple of decommissioned Air Force bases in our area. Are they options for temporary shelter for some of these people?
So I tell policymakers, this is how I frame it. If today, and we woke up tomorrow, and 5,000 formerly housed people became unhoused due to a natural disaster, whether it was a flood, whether it was an earthquake, whether it was whatever, our government will have to figure out a plan. So buildings, empty buildings, whether it's an empty community center, whether it's an empty office building, everything has to be on the table. So just think, for a whole year, schools were closed and those buildings were empty. So what if we had a conversation with school officials to house folks, to feed folks temporarily there, to use their soccer field, I think we have to really begin to think about how we're going to address this crisis that we're in, because we're in a crisis. People don't think of it as a crisis, but we are in a crisis. And as I mentioned earlier, the looming eviction moratorium is going to be ending in June. That's only 2 months away. What's going to happen to those folks when they have to pay back, I think, up to 30% of their rent that they were not able to pay? Some people are facing up in the $5,000 to $10,000. So if a person can't pay $1,800 a month for rent, where they're going to get $5,000 or $10,000 to pay back rent?
Right. Will your Poor People campaign be working with the U.S. Housing Secretary and the upcoming Biden proposals that have been suggested?
Sure. We generally work with anyone that will listen, that particularly will listen and want to hear the voices of those most impacted by poverty. And so, yes.
Okay. Your focus is a lot on poverty that causes homeless, but how can we support the mentally ill?
We have to make sure the county of Sacramento provides the health services. So we have to make sure the county has funding within the county, but also the county funds those nonprofit, those local community-based organizations that can provide informal as well as formal mental health services that are culturally appropriate. So whether they're parenting classes, whether they're seeing a therapist, whether they're participating in an anger management class, whether it's talking with someone on the phone, all of those options need to be on the table, and they need to be in the community that's accessible to those folks who are unhoused, as well as those of us who are housed.
Right. This may be a bigger question than you have time for, but somebody says, I hear the term systemic racism, but no one ever defines it. Can you give a quick answer to what that is in this context?
Sure, I will try. It's been there for a long time. It's deep, it's pernicious, and it just didn't happen. And it really are policies. It's those policies, it's those practices. So what I always say to people is, I don't worry about what you say, I worry about what you do, because it's those policies that hurt people. Okay? It is those policies. You know, when we continue to use law enforcement to criminalize people, it's those policies. So we're setting up a false dynamic. What did I say? If the majority of the people in Sacramento who are unhoused are Black and brown and indigenous people, and you continue to send the police in to solve the problem, you've created more problems than a solvable problem.
Good job. So given that the city was not all that successful during the winter in terms of helping the unhoused, do we really have much hope that we're going to be able to help out overall with the problems that we're faced with in the city?
I'm hopeful, and this is why I'm hopeful. The day before, in January, we had the rainstorm where we lost several unhoused people. The day before that, really the night before, I did an interview, I think it was Channel 10, and I talked about how cold it gets in Sacramento without the rain, let alone when the rain comes and the wind comes. And I think that losing those people was a wake-up call for all of us, not just for our elected officials at the city and county level, but for all of us as citizens, that we all have to give voice to making sure that there's some type of housing for folks, that we have to be willing to get on the phone and call our elected officials, or send that email, or show up. You know, like we said, we won't be silent anymore. You don't have to get out in the street and protest. You can send the email. You can talk to your neighbor. At our last breakfast, we had Fremont Presbyterian Church members out. There's different ways people can get involved and give voice to the issue. But I think we learned a hard lesson. And so our condolences to the folks who lost their lives, to their families. But I think we all learned that you cannot ignore a problem. It's not going away. And I think that's why so much effort is being done now.
So some people feel that using one large facility like the former Arco Arena would be better than a lot of scattered small facilities. What do you and your organization think?
Well, the Arco Arena, it's very large, and as long as you have to have a variety. And I think what happens is people think just pushing unhoused people into large places like that is going to solve the problem. You have to provide the variety. Some people do very well in large settings, and then some people do better in a smaller setting, where maybe they're staying in a 4-bedroom house with another person there providing supervision. So I don't think we have to pit one against the other, but I do think we need a variety, and I think that's what's missing, that it's not the variety, because putting a person that would drive me crazy if I was in a place with 5,000 or 2,000 other folks that I don't know. I'm a pretty friendly person, but I don't know if that would be really good for my mental health.
Right. We all want that sense of security and a little bit of privacy. Are you familiar with San Antonio's Haven for Hope program?
No.
Apparently it's been quite successful. I've heard about it as well, too, as a model.
It's Haven for Hope?
Haven for Hope San Antonio, yeah.
Okay.
They have it's very comprehensive, apparently, and I've heard other reports about that as well, too.
Oh, good. Okay, I'll check that out. Okay.
Let's see, what else do we have here that might work? So are tiny homes more effective financially than using motel rooms?
I don't know enough about the cost to run the cost for a tiny home, so I can't do the comparison. I would have to know the cost. I can tell you the average cost, depending on which part of Sacramento you're in, to get a person in a motel. It costs anywhere between, on the low end, $75 a night up to $200 a night. So, depending on where the cost of the tiny home, the electrical hookup, all of that has to be calculated in to see. But once again, I really think we need to really understand that the unhoused, like all of us, need the variety. Some would like living in a tiny home, Some would like having a little privacy by living in a motel room where they're by themselves, with the amenities and everything. So I think we just need to look at the various options.
So one last quick question. If someone has extra food or clothes, is it safe to go to a homeless encampment and just offer that to people, or is that considered rude, or
so best? What we try to do is encourage persons to work with an existing organization that may be working with that particular homeless encampment first. And then, so for example, the reason we say that is that when we were doing a couple of months ago, when I was down at the Stockton Boulevard encampment, a couple of times a week, we would have people drop off lots of canned goods, right? Well, they're unhoused. They don't have can openers. They have no way of heating up the food. So it's things like that we want to make sure people are aware of. So it's things like that.
Much more practical. Great. Faye, there's so many more questions. We probably could go on for another hour, but you have just been priceless in what you've offered us here today. Thank you folks so very much.
Well, thank you very much.
Lori, back to you.
Yes, I also want to say thank you for your responses to the questions. And just to let our members know, we've been doing this for a couple of years or a couple semesters now, and this is the most number of questions we've ever received. And so we know there were valuable questions that came in. We can save those questions and get them over to Faye after the session has ended. So if you were disappointed that your question didn't get answered, we'll get that information over to her. But Faye, this was very educational, timely, and I can see by the questions that have come in, people are really interested in trying to help. And we want to thank you for your commitment and everything that you do. It sounds like you tirelessly, and even when you're not feeling good, you're here with us today, putting the time in. So thank you so much for your presentation. And I also, you know, we make a donation of $25 for each of the speakers to the Seth Nelson Student Emergency Fund as a token of our appreciation. And for those of you that are looking for ways to help, for folks that might be on the edge, there's a way for our members to contribute to the emergency grant fund. And these are for students that are, you know, trying to cover their bills and things like that. So Faye, we're going to do this in your honors. So thank you very much.
Well,
and then also, today's presentation was recorded. You're welcome to view it after it goes live, and it'll be available on this Renaissance Society Forum channel on YouTube, and then also from our Renaissance website. And then it is the first of the month, and so this is the time that we ask, again, if you have something that you can help donate to the food pantry, there's a link down there that you can contribute so that we can, again, help students that might be, you know, feeling the pinch of not having enough money or food. And with that, let me talk about our next Friday forum. It is a tale of three spouses, partners in leadership, and it'll be interviewed and moderated by Beth Rueck. And I think that we're going to have an excellent forum next Friday. We want to thank everybody for attending and have a wonderful week.